Thank you for joining me. I'm Sandy Walden from Serenity, your Master Grief Coach and Master Grief Coach trainer. Today, my guest is the most amazing and wonderful Reverend Debbie Malison from the Spiritualist Church. Debbie is a psychic medium. And you know what, Debbie, I'm going to let you introduce yourself because you do it much better than I do.
I am an ordained minister, a certified medium, and a national spiritualist teacher through the National Spiritualist Association of Churches, and I pastor a spiritualist church in West Dallas.
Thank you. Thank you. So we had a conversation a few days ago, and if it's all right with you, I'd like to recap a few of those things just to sort of reinforce what some of our conversation was. So one of the things we talked about is that every medium is a psychic, but not every psychic is a medium. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, and it's an important point because I've had people come to me and say, oh, I've been going to psychics for years and my loved one never comes through. And I'll look at them and say, a psychic or a medium, and they have just this blank look. Because it matters. You're never going to hear from your loved one from a psychic. That's not what they do. A psychic is reading your energy and all those things that are around you. A medium is connecting to a specific spirit, identifying that spirit and bringing through communication from them. So completely different. Not one isn't better than the other. It's just different.
That makes a lot of sense. Something else you said, and you used the most clear, plain language, which I have to say I completely appreciate, was you said there is no direct dial. So if I'm having a conversation with you for a reading, and maybe I think I'm going to hear from my Uncle Dean because he totally rocked and was a lot of fun and thinking about him makes me happy. If Uncle Dean doesn't come through, but maybe Aunt Elsie does that mean Uncle Dean didn't love me?
No, it doesn't. And that's another big misconception. People generally come to a reading with, one or two people they really want to hear from. And it's not direct dial. Again, you have to understand you're dealing with another world that we can't really define exactly until we get there. And they know who you need to hear from and what you need to hear, and you have to trust in that. So not hearing from that one person is not a failure of the reading. It is that person was not supposed to come through that day because they wanted you to hear from Elsie or whoever. And also, it is also vibrational, the same way that you don't naturally are drawn to every person here on earth. Not every spirit over there is drawn to every medium. So that is why, in theory, and you should not really do this, it's not healthy. If you went to 4 mediums in one day, you'd probably hear from 4 different people because it's vibrational. Different spirits vibrate. So it is never a failure. And sometimes what you thought you needed to hear is not what you needed to hear. Maybe what you're wanting is validation or approval of a decision you've already made, and you just want that spiritual pat on the back. Maybe what you've made is the wrong decision, and you don't want to hear that, and they know that. So there's many, many reasons for not hearing from that specific person, but it's never about failure. It is never about they don't love me, and it is never about they aren't around me. That is never why.
Awesome. That's really, really helpful that you clarified that even more. So another thing we talked about, gosh, it was just in my head and now it disappeared.
That happens to me all the time.
Wow. Okay. And I have 17 questions sitting here, don't I? Oh, we talked about being a good sitter. So if you are reading for me, you are the medium, I am the sitter. And some of the things we talked about is that I don't feed you information. If you're saying he came through in a plaid shirt, I shouldn't say, well, yeah, he had a whole closet full. But it is helpful for me to say, yes, I understand, or no, I do not. Is that right?
Exactly right. And very important. When you come to a sitting, bring your energy, bring your open heart and your open mind. Because again, if you present as a closed house, curtains closed, doors shut, who's going to knock on that door? So you want to come in spiritually and emotionally open. If you feel emotion when your loved ones are identified, don't be afraid to show that emotion, because all you're doing is you're going to make the reading better. Because now the medium feels stronger. The spirit is being fed by that energy. It's all on energy. To hide all of that, it lowers your reading, and it won't be as well. And yes or no is important in the sense of course we can just keep going, but to know that, yep, that's right. Plaid shirt, yes, that's all we need to know. We don't need to know the rest of it. That's feeding the medium. Yes or no, so that we all know we're on the right track. Spirit, me, you, that's important. But it doesn't need to be more than that. And a medium should never ask you who you want to hear from either. Please remember that as well, because a true medium that's really connected, they're going to bring through whoever's meant for you to know. They cannot dial a spirit. If they say they can, you want to keep walking to another medium.
That is really important and excellent advice to remember, that there's not a guarantee. And if they're saying, yes, I'm bringing through Archangel Michael, I have him here for you all the time, I can always dial him up, that's not somebody we should feel comfortable trusting.
No.
No guarantees.
You should not. They should always be able to validate who they're talking to in some form, whether it's the message, something about them, something. They should always be able to do that. If they're really connected, they're going to be able to do something that's going to convince you of who they are.
And I have to say, you and I have known each other for a while, and for anybody who's listening, that doesn't mean that I don't trust you to work with me, because what people may not know is every time I talk to you, whether it's my son or somebody else who comes through, I've heard you say, okay, we've said that before, give me more. And they always come through with information that is usually something I've forgotten, but triggers a memory or an emotion or a feeling. So I feel like that's really important. And I believe you call that the evidence. Am I right?
I do. And I think especially if you do repeat people, and every medium has their own boundaries. Many mediums, they'll give you one reading and then that's it. They don't do more than one. We all have our own, and none of us is wrong. It's just what we do. But if I'm doing someone that I've done before, if it's been a year, I very often won't remember because you do so many in between. But if I do remember it, and I'll say, no, we've done that, because maybe in the moment you're going to forget we did that, but later on driving home in the car or laying in bed, you're going to be like, oh, but you know what? I heard that before. And it casts that bit of doubt. And they're almost always very accommodating when you say that. Like, no, if you have a great, like, great grandfather, great aunt, great uncle, cousin, third time removed or whatever, and people say, yeah, but you can never validate that. Yes, you can. Because what I do is, and other mediums, not just me, because this is about all mediums. So you can say to them, tell me something that is passed down your family line. Maybe it's a genetic feature, a physical feature, something like that. And they'll give you something. Maybe all the people, actually, you were in a church service where I did this once for a congregation member. And the spirit said to me, all the men have large ears. And I said to the person, he's telling me all the men down his line. And that's what did it, though. Like, okay, now I accept that's great grandpa. So people that say, and always be careful of, not saying this is impossible, be careful of a medium that will say, I'm bringing someone through from 100 years ago, 200 years ago. I'm not saying that that's impossible. However, I also see a pattern in that. You can't prove that. So then they'll give information that's actually psychic, and that's what they're doing. And again, none of those things are wrong, but be aware. It's not usually the norm. I'm saying not impossible, because there are mediums that can do it. I want to make that clear. But if you want to say average reading, to get someone from 100, 200 years ago isn't the norm. Be careful of that.
That's helpful. That's helpful. So something else you addressed and really resonated with me, because I work with people as a grief coach, and of course, when we're grieving, we're focused on that time of death, that time of heartbreak, and we see it as separation because it's very human separation, isn't it? And when I work with people, I focus not only on that, but on keeping the memories alive from your time together and moving forward. And I heard you say something very similar, that when you're connecting with our loved ones, they're not too concerned about when they walked through the door to the other side, that they want to connect on other levels. Can you say a bit more about that, or have I misunderstood?
Yes, well, and exactly that. In the beginning, there are some teachers where they say you always have to define the crossing. That's evidence. I found that not to be true. I have found that there are points in a reading where it'll come through, but most people, that was a point of transition to them. That was how they stepped over. That's really more about what we're left with than them. They never come through. They never remember pain, suffering, the moment of contact, whatever that was. They never have that memory ever, because we're taught the soul is pulled right before then. So imagine if, and this is what I use as a metaphor, for 20 years, every time you call your child, you have to preface the conversation with, and you remember that I went through 22 hours of hard labor and blah, 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 and sweating and screaming. Think about if you had to say that every single time you talk. It's kind of the same thing. So every time this loved one comes through, you insist now, what was that door of transition? They had a whole life other than that. So they don't want to relive that every single time. For them, that was how they stepped over. It's not how they remember themselves. So it's really important.
That's huge. That's huge. So let's continue this conversation, and I really appreciate it. So something people will often ask, is how they prepare. For instance, when I prepare to work for a client, I come into my room here and I light candles and I flow the Reiki and I ask prayers. I ask for our guides and our loved ones to be with us. It's sort of my ritual to put myself in an energetic space, but is it necessary for them to be holding on to these crystals when they work with you? Is there something they have to do to work with you to make a reading effective?
No. And for them to prepare, if they want to hold that picture in their hands or that shirt or all of those things, and it makes them feel better, that's fine. We don't need it. We're connecting spiritually, from spirit through spirit to spirit. Having said that, when you see TV shows and things where you see mediums touching the shirt or touching that, what they're generally doing is working on things like missing persons or crimes or something. So they're doing psychometry, which is just a whole nother interview sometimes, but that's where you touch something and get the energy of the object. Now, to do mediumship, you do not need to do that. It's separate things. Neither one, again, is wrong. There are mediums I know who will say, and there are people that will walk into a reading and say to me, they'll get their purses out. I've brought all of this, and I'll be like, please don't. First of all, if I see that picture, now I have a conscious created memory. Well, there goes any validation for saying, and I just use your son as an example. One of the first things was his hair. He was really proud of that hair. Right? But if I would have seen a picture though, Sandy, what would that comment have meant to you? So again, if you need those pictures in your purse because that makes you feel like, then do it. But the medium should never ask for things like that. That is feeding. Crystals, all of those things, I'm not negating them. We don't need them for our work. So
it's a matter of what we do to make ourselves comfortable and sort of center ourselves in this space. Is that right?
Yes. And if that ritual for the sitter or the client, if for them to go to a reading, maybe they do this on a basis and they like to do their rituals, to feel better. Go ahead, do it, have at it. What I'm saying is, from my point of view, when you sit down with me, I don't need you to line up crystals and I don't need you to show pictures and clothes but have at it if that works for you. We don't need it.
So not a right or wrong, what's right for you.
What's right for you, always, always.
That's really huge. So something else I hear from people is that they had a rough relationship with this person. Perhaps it was abusive or they were cruel in some way. Do they have to be afraid of this person now? Can this being on the other side come back to hurt them?
No. Remember again, everything is vibrational. So the vibration of that person is going to be very way down there and yours isn't. When you cross over what we are taught, it is so much love. And if you talk to people that have had NDEs or near-death experience, they will say that the feeling of love is something they can't even find words for. So you are never going to be unsafe. There is no hell, purgatory, all those things were created by man. So that person who did that abuse and those things, they're somewhere else with other vibrations that they need to be around. They are not going to be around you. You're never going to share that space, because this happens where people have crossed because of someone hurt them or abusive spouses, and they'll sit in a reading and they are afraid of that. They are, I don't want, and they'll say to me, if I say, sometimes they'll say, any medium will say, I'm feeling a man stepping in, and right away they'll be, I don't want to hear from, I get it all the time, my mother, my father, my husband, I don't want it. And you just don't. You don't. You're working for the client, the highest and greatest good for them. That person is not included in that. So that's not going to happen. Strictly is never going to happen.
That's really helpful. So if there's somebody that I was afraid of, it's okay to go to sleep at night. They can't hurt me.
Nope, they will never hurt you. They will never hurt you. The fears that we have of it, or the imagined things in our dreams, that's our minds. That's our human minds. That's our fear processing itself. It's not real. God and spirit, that's all love. So love is never going to hurt you. People that think they need protection from these things and that sort of thing, they're talking from a place of fear. Because there's people in the world still that they're afraid to acknowledge there's something more. Why? Because it messes with that little box of life that they know. It's very safe to think this box is all there is. When you accept, and I believe good mediumship does that, proves it, you are accepting that this is just a moment in your journey. And that's hard for some people. Again, our loved ones were taught there's no sense of time over there. It just is all existence. And they're seeing any part of our lives that they want to. So they know they're going to see us in a minute, really. So they want us to go on and finish this. Do your learning. Do whatever you want to do, because you're going to see me in a minute anyway. It's all love and it's all good, and you don't need to be protected. And again, if you go to someone who is telling you prayer, protection, and doing these things, please think twice about that, because just that information is creating in your mind, what am I supposed to be afraid of? What do I need protective of? So think about, and there's many people with many beliefs, and I don't judge any of that. But my experience and my people, I know our experience of this is that world is love. We don't need to be protected. It's vibrational. We're not going to attract a vibration of someone who had a very low journey, so to speak. They're not going to be anywhere in our creation. They're in their own.
That makes a lot of sense. And can I trust that they are continuing their own evolution on the other side as well?
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. And that journey can be fast or slow by human standards or never happen. But it is their journey to have with whoever they need around. It won't involve you unless you want it to. Some people, if it's been many, many years, they want to sort of face that person, or they want to say something to them. That's a choice you're making, at 40 years later or whatever time you choose. But no, it's never going to happen. And again, I get it all the time with parents who were abusive, and people will, the minute I say I have a woman, they will immediately, I don't want to hear from my mother. And I'll be like, not a problem.
Okay.
So it's not going to happen.
So another thing that comes up quite a lot is that often we will think, well, if they've crossed over to the other side, they must now be all wise and all knowing. And so if it was my infant, this is now the person I'm going to for guidance. Or if this, whoever this was, this is the person I should tap into and check in with to figure out if I should buy that car or take this trip. And what I have experienced working with you and with other mediums is that my son is still a hoot, that he still has his personality and he's still witty and he still likes to poke the bear. Does that mean that I should go to him and turn over all of my own, should I release all of my own judgment and trust him or anybody else comes through with everything? Do they know everything now?
No, they don't. We're taught that and they prove it in mediumship. You retain your personality. So the idea of our journey towards becoming the light, becoming closer to God, you're talking, millions, thousands of time as we know it. So I always say, if Uncle Joe is terrible with money here, why on earth are you going to ask him if you should buy that car? He's not going to be any better. He clearly didn't think in terms of money. So you retain your personality. With spouses, sometimes if there was a very dominant spouse here, do you want to ask their permission? Because they're probably going to say no, because they did here. And until they start to evolve, and we don't know when that is, so you hear from them for the love and guidance and something you need, but we are here to live our life and make our choices right or wrong. We don't learn without making mistakes. So we're here to do that. So no, the relationship is about love and knowing they're there and sharing, like, yes, I saw this birthday party and oh my gosh, isn't it wonderful to think so-and-so saw Christmas, or whatever. It makes us feel good. But to get into, well, what do you think? It looks like a good car, but I don't know. Should I? Why would you ask them? Didn't ask them here.
Don't turn over our power.
No, don't turn over your power, and they do not become all-knowing. They're on their journey. It's a continuation of this journey. It's not a brand new journey. It's a continuation of this. So they're still learning. So no, and you don't want to keep asking, I need to talk, I need to see a medium every week or every month because I have to make sure I'm doing the right things. It's unhealthy. Every medium has their own boundaries about it. And you have to talk to every medium about who that is and what their boundaries are. To me, it has to be 6 months. That's what I'm comfortable with. Then I'm assured that I've forgotten that whole reading from 6 months ago, so I don't worry about that. But the other side of that is you're wanting to know they're there, the love and that connection, but you're not planning your life by that reading, and that's what you shouldn't do. We're here to have our journey the same as they had their journey.
That makes a lot of sense. So here's something else. If perhaps the person who crossed over didn't meet their child yet, or didn't know, for instance, my son did not know during our human experience any of my grandchildren, do they know what's going on? Do they see the traits and the characteristics? Do they have any influence on what's happening with these people that perhaps they never met in a human way?
Absolutely, they do. And we hear it all the time in messages like when great-grandfather comes through. Obviously, he never met you. Sometimes grandfather never met you. And they will give you validation of your life. They'll tell you things that happen because remember that they're existing. So the only reason they wouldn't know is if there's an ending, right? And there is not an ending. It's a continuation. And also remember that that world is not a world that's far away above the clouds. It's all around us. So when you get a random smell or I don't know, all sorts of signs and symbols, and we'll probably get into that at some point. When you do that, that's a sign that they are around and hear that. Very often what I get, and every medium has their language, I get what I call a soul connection. So I will get, uncle or cousin or somebody that's over there, and they are directly tied to this one. Like they really relate to those characteristics of this person. They don't need to ever see them. They are seeing them. They're just not seeing them humanly. And we have to remember, this is a moment of our existence. So they are seeing. And with a child, you touched on this before, if our child passed as an infant or a young child, which is devastating, I get asked, do they continue to grow? They do if they choose. Again, you can get people where maybe the child transitioned at 9 and they'd stayed 9 because they liked it. They don't have to move on. But sometimes you will bring through a 20-something-year-old, not by linear time, mind you. So not because my 9-year-old transitioned 11 years ago and is now 21. It's not like that. It would be an evolvement of personality, character, soul. So sometimes you bring through someone in their 20s and a good spirit and a good connection is they'll tell us that they passed as a child, which is helpful because then you can say, okay, but they passed as, and then the client understands this is the child that kept growing. They didn't end their life. They transitioned to a different form of it because it was time for them to do that. Again, remembering you never ever can leave your human body until it's time. And again, NDEs explain that all the time. Terrible accidents that people walk away from all the time. They're not miracles. It wasn't their time. It was an experience they went through and for everyone around them to go through. So your child can still evolve, still be there. You can still hear from them. People hear from, I bring through, and it's always very sensitive, miscarriages. And some, there's some women, they don't want to hear that one, and so you kind of look away and say, I don't know, maybe if you maybe had lost a baby and you look away because I'm giving them the privacy to react. Some people don't want to, or maybe they terminated that pregnancy and they just don't want that brought up. But yet that spirit wants them to know, hey, it's okay. It's perfectly fine. This is what was supposed to happen with us. And they're okay. And they just want to acknowledge that. It's never an ending, though.
That's so important what you just said. You said it may have been a miscarriage. It may have been a termination. I'm hearing you say loud and clear, there is no guilt. There is no recrimination. No. It was just what was meant to happen. And this is all loving and okay. Mm-hmm.
And we take away, if we look at life, everything that happens is a lesson. So we take away, what did we learn? And I don't ever mean to disrespect grief when I say this. So please, I hope no one takes it that way, but we learn something from every experience. And does going through that experience change now our perception of life, ours or everyone else's? Are we perhaps less judgmental because of what we went through? Are we perhaps more sensitive to someone with a family life that's not perfect or a child that turned out with challenges? Are we perhaps more sensitive because we have a different set of eyes now that we see? So we have to look at when we can step away. And again, I don't disrespect or try to shorten that process. You need to feel all of that process in order to learn from it. But when you do take those things that you learned and use them in your world and other people.
That's huge. That's huge. And I feel like that's the bridge between our human experience and our spiritual experience. And you're helping us to see and understand the purpose and the reasoning. And it doesn't take away the pain or the hurt, but hopefully it helps to soften and heal it over time.
Yes.
That matters.
Yes. It's not disrespecting the loss. And again, you can't move forward if you don't allow yourself to feel everything you need to feel. So always, none of these beliefs are meant to take away any feelings anyone has, because you have to go through those feelings. It is just the hope that you at some point can reach a point where it's a comfort to know they changed, but they're still there.
Beautifully put. So if we always have the ability to be connected with our loved ones in some way, I will hear from people, I have asked him or her to come in my dreams and they're not seeing him, but my neighbor down the road said they visited them. What the heck? Don't they care about me? Don't they know I need them? Why would they go to Jenny Sue?
And I get that. And I get that all the time. And I get, if Aunt Mary had 6 kids, why is she coming to me? Again, remembering we are energy now. Energy is limitless. We can take all different forms and be all different places. Think of a prism, a glass prism, and how you can have all those streams of light coming out of it, and yet it's one prism, right? So that soul can be that soul, but it has it can be in all of these places, and it's still that soul. It just has many, again, we tend to think humanly, one place, one time, one person. It isn't like that anymore. And how wonderful the thought of that freedom is, by the way, to me. But it can be that that person down the street needed that message that that person was going to bring. You didn't, you just want it. But they know what you really need and what you want. Also, the other part of that is in our dreams, most of the time we don't remember, right? Because our dreams, our soul separates and goes on a journey and travels and has experiences with other souls. That doesn't always come back to our human memory, but that is in our subconscious. So you probably, in theory, are hearing from whoever you want to, but you're not given the human memory of it. But you have to trust that it happens. You have to trust that it happens.
That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. And something when I talk to people, I often say too, sometimes we're in so much pain that we don't have the ability to open up. For instance, when you're really stressed and you're working on something, the 2-year-old could be asking you for something and you haven't heard a cotton picking thing they've said. It's not that they're not speaking to you. It's that it's not registering because you're so focused on balancing the checkbook or whatever we're doing. Is it the same when we're in pain that they might be knocking on our door, calling out our name, touching us, wrapping their arms around us, and maybe we just don't have the ability to be aware in that moment? Is that
absolutely? That's what happens. Lots of readings you come through and the spirit will describe seeing you sit at the kitchen table or hearing a conversation you had and they were right there screaming at you, metaphorically. And we don't hear it because we're in all this pain and all we can see is the pain. And it's no different, even though like I do this and other mediums do this, trust me, we have huge panic and anxiety, and we'll tell ourselves, I know they're right there. I know they're right there. But in that human moment of emotion, which you have to have because that's why you're here, you can't. The one thing that these beliefs and these abilities have for me is I don't stay in that place anymore. When I go through my times of feeling the pain, feeling loss, feeling anxiety, feeling fear, I still experience it, but it's shorter and I come out of it faster. Because once I can calm myself, I can say, I know it's already figured out what's going to happen, or I know they're okay. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. So what can I do? Because I'm certainly not a medium. I don't have your abilities, but I do believe I have a profound connection with my son and with others. Yep. So what can I do to become more aware of them? For instance, one of the things, in my book, I talked about the acorns that Mikey used to send because, oh, come on, he literally dropped them on our heads one time. Yeah. That boy is not subtle, but those don't come very often anymore. Instead, I'll still go in the garage and hear Queen playing and watch my husband rolling his eyes. So I think about it. It's now been, with the time we're recording this, we're about 10 and a half years after my son died. And I think about it as like when they were teenagers. It's not that we didn't love each other and care about one another, but I'd watch him pull out the drive in the truck and I would just say a prayer to keep him safe, but I couldn't ride along with him. And I sort of feel like this is the same way, that he knows I don't need the acorns so much anymore. And he's making sure I'm not dependent on them. But the songs are still him saying, woohoo, I'm still here, and pushing the buttons because that's fun. Am I understanding that? Or is that he just doesn't care anymore and he's taking a trip to Tahiti?
No, your explanation is spot on. I think the acorns were closer to the beginning. So you probably were still carrying these doubts like, yes, I believe, but I don't know. Those acorns, I still recommend that book. By the way, one of the most amazing stories and written from someone without, you didn't have a lot of training and all of that. So everything is true and from the heart. And that's why I love that book. It was so real, all of your experiences. And he was so amazing to do that. But you needed that solid proof then. Now you are comfortable and you do believe and you do accept. And you accept those signs like the radio. And you accept things like if you have a random thought come into your head out of nowhere with him or remember a laugh. So he can be more subtle because you're secure in that. It's never, never, never that they've gone away and don't love us. It never is. But our needs change too. And again, like I say, I have kids all in their 40s. I don't hear from them for a long period. They're middle-aged people. They're not going to call their mother every 5 minutes, right? So it's, the needs change, we change. It's still if you really, really need something, if you're really in an emotional low where you need something and you put it out there that I just need something, what goes forward from that is they're not going to sit down, materialize, and have coffee, which would be wonderful. It doesn't usually happen. You have to then raise your awareness and look for anything that's a little out of sync. Look for anything. Examples. I had a person this person was listening to a country western station, and their person in spirit loved this certain Frank Sinatra song. Out of nowhere on this country western station plays Frank Sinatra. Is that a mistake from the DJ? Probably in the physical world, but this person realized it was a sign. So what you're looking for with signs is things that are a little bit out of the norm. Like, I shouldn't be hearing that, or why did I walk into the room right when that happened? Pennies on the floor are silly, but they're common. You have to say, of course, did I drop my purse the other day, and didn't look down and things like that. But if all of a sudden you see a penny in the kitchen and darn well your purse has been in the bedroom or whatever, accept it. So you have to accept anything that's a little bit out of the norm. And when you do, acknowledge that acceptance, say, I see that, I know that's you. So now what you've done, first of all, your awareness and sensitivity is up, number one. Number two, they hear, oh my gosh, they got it. They heard me. And that frees other opportunities or signs for them to do that. So it's, again, just like with mediumship sittings, there is responsibilities on the person receiving. You cannot just sit and think, I can be as still as a chair and not, you will get signs if you raise, the more you guys saw those acorns, and I remember reading all the journal, the more you really accepted and the more you got, right? It was just an amazing, amazing, wonderful experience for you. It's the same for a lot of people. Electronics are super common for spirit to manipulate, super common, so things like, your TV turns on randomly and you think, did someone sit on the remote? Did the dog step on the remote? Now first check, because maybe they did, but sometimes they didn't. I went through a phase just a couple of months ago. And we all have low times, like I said, medium or not. And I said, I need something. I know you're right next to me. I just need something. I'm feeling really insecure and anxiety driven. And I know this will be okay. But and 2 days in a row, my TV went on when no one was home. I walked in 2 days in a row and the TV was on, and I knew I had not watched it because it was my bedroom TV. And I just stood there the second time, like, thank you. Okay, I got it. I know you're here. So again, raising your awareness, and accepting those signs. If all of a sudden you see birds are a wonderful one, if all of a sudden a cardinal or any bird really that's wild lands on your deck 6 feet away from your chair, they don't do that. That isn't normal behavior. So look for that as a sign. So again, it's raising our awareness as well.
So that robin or that cardinal or hummingbird is not my person, but it's a message sent from my person.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes. Okay. Yes.
I'm sorry, please go ahead.
Mm-mm.
Is it disrespectful or demanding of me to say, hey, this is what I need from you to be sure that you're communicating with me? Maybe it's a particular animal or an aroma or a song. Is that too much? Is that okay?
It usually is too much. Again, what you're doing, you're taking something that exists differently from you and trying to put a human need on it, because that's what that is a human need. So maybe you're saying, I demand, a white rose appearing on my table. Now, I have to say, if you're open to it, it could be where you're walking through a store and a box with a white rose grabs your attention. That's bringing a white rose to you. Or in a story or on a television, all of a sudden you see white roses on the table in the background. There are times when that can happen. Absolutely. And people do it and it works. But it's equally better to me. Like I said 2 months ago, I just need something because I'm just hitting a real low this week and I just need that little bump. And they chose to, and the first time the TV was on, honestly, I was like, did I do that? Because you always go to that first, which would have been weird because it was daytime and I wouldn't watch, but still. But the second time I made more of a, I knew. And then it was like, thank you. So you can put boundaries on them, but understand when you do that, you're putting boundaries on them.
So for instance, music was often our connection, and I might say, hey, if you're hanging around me today, in the next half an hour or so, perhaps I'd like to hear this or that. And if you're not, I'm cool with it. But that would sort of like be a warm hug today. Does that feel like too much? Because I'm telling you, it almost always happens.
Well, again, I was just going to say, if it works, then it works. But I can equally talk to as many people that say, I asked for this and I asked for that and it doesn't work. And that's also going to depend, again, personalities. Yeah. So he's very good at what he does, your son. And so he'll make it happen. Not everybody that transitions is really that good at it. Plain and simple. So sometimes they could manipulate one thing and not another. So they give you the one thing, your phone rings randomly with their old number, something like that, but that's not what you asked for, so you disregard it.
That's the concern.
So I think you can put out there, I need something, like for me, what I said is I need something real, is what I did. Now, I wasn't looking for a specific person, so that's different too, but, and like you said, it works for you. So you can try anything would be my answer, but be open to everything. So try anything, be open to everything would be my answer to that.
I like the way you say that because, there's this part of me that says, well, I'd like this song, but then I'd turn the radio off and go stand in the backyard by the trees. Well, doggone, there's only so much that's reasonable. So what might I know? And I know we're getting long here, so I promise this will be almost my last. How can I become more aware that they are reaching out to me? What can I do to become more aware, to become more sensitive?
Again, it's raising your awareness, being more open. First of all, be open that you will accept signs. Things like if Queen was obviously something you relate to, accept that if I randomly walk in somewhere and that's what's playing, I have this acknowledge in my head, thank you, Mike, got it. Quick like that. If you see a penny on the floor and you did not drop a penny, you've walked through that kitchen 15 times today. Okay, I got it. When you start acknowledging these things, not that I want anybody to sit all day and look for signs, that's unhealthy and you'll never have them. You have to live your life. But if your awareness is higher, people do numbers all the time. They'll come to me and say, all of a sudden I'm seeing, 22 and I'm trying to open and I'm seeing it everywhere. And I say to them, first of all, you always saw 22? You didn't notice. You're noticing now because you're being pulled to it, because you're asking for a sign, your awareness. He was 22, she was 22, dad's birthday was 22, and you're drawn to 22. So then say in your mind, okay, I get it, 22. But it really isn't that those things are appearing before you. It's just you're being drawn to them. Say you drive to work the same route every day. All of a sudden you start looking at that house on the corner halfway through. And you're thinking, why do I all of a sudden notice that house? I've been driving this route 10 years. Maybe you're looking for somebody. Pay attention to that. Acknowledge it. Say, okay, there must be a reason, and just be open to that. So I think it's raising your awareness, number one, and accepting when something is a bit out of sync. If you're walking in the woods and you see feathers, seriously, you're supposed to see feathers. So again, people can go too far with that. I'll get people really that'll say, oh my gosh, I found a feather in the woods today. It was so pretty. That's a sign. Well, was it? Or were you under a bird's nest? Because you have to be reasonable too. But there's people that will see a feather in their house. That's a sign. In their car, at their front door, that's a sign. Anything that's a little bit out of the norm is what I say. But accept it and acknowledge in your mind, okay, I accept that. And that opens that door, like they're hearing me. They're hearing me. And then they can do things. Smells. Smells are a big one. Is it the person next door? You know what? Go to the door and try to smell it, because if it's a smell from, I do this because I have someone that communicates for years with me, one of my people, just with smells. The first thing I do when I smell it in my house is I go to the door and I look outside, and I won't be able to smell it outside if it's from spirit. And then I come back and it's like, okay, I hear you, but I make sure I eliminate the obvious, or I'll say to one of my kids, do you smell whatever? No. Okay. And then I know it's for me. So
that makes a lot of sense. So it's a connector is what I'm hearing from you. But we have to be open enough to say, oh, I get it.
Yeah,
I get it.
And again, we would love it if they just could materialize and sit down and have coffee, which is what most people, when they say they want a sign, that's what they want. And it's like, that would be great. It doesn't happen. It would require so much work on the part of them and 52 other people behind, it just isn't going to happen. So accept what they can do, accept what they can do and be happy with that. Don't ask for something that is your human need, because that's two different areas.
That's huge. That's huge.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not, my understanding, they're not waiting around 24/7. And I get time is human, not spirit, but they're not there at our beck and call. So they're busy too, doing their own work and their own learning and growing. So they can do that stuff and still keep in touch with us. Can they be in all these different places at once? How does this work? Am I making?
Well, again, for an image, I use a glass prism.
Okay.
One prism, right? How many paths of light come off that prism? It's still that prism. Every path of light you see off that prism is actually that prism reflecting. So they are energy. So absolutely, they can do many things at the same time, be many places energetically at the same time.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, I know I'm going to have many, many more questions, but I have to say, as I'm talking to you, what keeps going through my head is these are like love notes.
Oh, yeah, they are. That's a really good word. I love that. Love notes.
And I know when I was dating hubby, he didn't always send them on demand.
No.
And I know that when my kids were growing up and moving away from home, I was the mom that would send them the text or the note and say, you need to call me in the next week or two. And these are the words I need you to say. And I kind of feel like this is the same thing. So you may not say exactly what I need, but maybe you'll send me that music, or maybe you'll give me that warm feeling. You'll send a love note in a new way. And
you have to be, again, like I said, ask for something, be open to anything. And the capabilities of spirit, remember, are not equal. So someone, all personalities are different. Your son is extremely well versed in what he does. Not everyone I bring through is quite at that level. So allow for that too. Maybe your loved one, whoever's loved one, would love to drop a penny on the floor, but they can't figure out how to do that, but they can make a song play on the radio. Accept whatever is given to you and be grateful and happy for that.
So that's about us learning our own new communication skills, isn't it? I think about when I bring a puppy home, it takes a while for us to get it.
In sync.
Yeah, and some puppies learned a lot faster than others. Well, let's be honest, I learned sometimes a lot slower than at other times. So this sounds very similar to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. It is. And again, there's responsibility in being the receiver. Whether it's in a reading or in life when you're looking for communication, you have a responsibility there too. It's not, you can't be a brick wall and expect, all this stuff to go on. So
Debbie, you said that you have some pretty healthy boundaries that you've established about how often you speak with clients. Do you feel that there is one way that's better or more effective, whether it's in person, via Zoom, on the phone? Is there one way that's right for somebody? What do you suggest, or what do you recommend, or how do you suggest that someone finds their best connection?
Well, first of all, it's all energy. We can do it over the phone. We can do it on Zoom. We can do it in person. We can even do it remotely. I have given readings where we can't connect, and I'll just get a reading. I'll connect with the person and get a reading and send it to them. It's energy, energy, energy. So how it's done physically is very often about the sitter, the client. Some people, they don't like over Zoom. They think it's going to be better if they're sitting with me. Now it will be for them because that's what they believe. For me, it isn't going to matter. I worked a lot over the phone before Zoom. Now I do everything over Zoom and I do like it. It is very nice because it gives that feeling of in person. As the world opens up, that'll change again, but there is no set format. However, again, personalities, mediums are humans first. So we need to be confident and feel good about the way we're doing it. I do know very good mediums that will not work any other way than in person. That's what works for them. And you have to honor that if that's what you want them to do. Everybody's different. So I speak to what I do. Other mediums have their own boundaries. I insist on 6 months between readings. Other people do or don't. Some people say a year. That's common. Some people say I will only do it once and that's it forever. That's common. So again, each of us have mediums. We're human first. So we have figured out what works for us to do this work. And my answer could be very different from, 5 other mediums. And none of us is wrong, by the way. None of us is wrong because we're doing what works for us and it's independent work.
Ooh, I really like that because I think that makes a big difference. Because if I'm working with you, I need to trust you.
Exactly. And we need to trust what we're doing. So we need things too. Again, first, we're human, no different than the client is human. We have our feelings too. So we all have to be in a good place together. You have your little things you do before you do your classes and rituals. I have things I do before a reading as well. Everybody has their stuff.
Perfect. So it really comes, I guess if we were going to sum it up, it's coming with in an atmosphere of love and trust and openness and discernment.
Yeah, absolutely. All of those things are equal.
That is wonderful, Debbie. I can't thank you enough for all of your time this morning. We both know there's going to be so many more questions.
I'm fine with it. I'm fine with it if it's helpful. Just let me know.
It is. I mean, even though I'm all these many years down the road and I live a wonderful life again, and many people I know, I don't think we get stuck in that moment of death. And I think that is, for me, that's the overriding message, that we're not stuck and neither are they. And working with someone like you reminds us of that in such a powerful way.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And, again, they never, ever come through. And if it does happen where they come through in mediumship very quickly, and that does not always happen, but if it does, I've never had anybody come through. They're always happy. They're always like, this is what had to happen. Here I am because I had to do this. And I've never brought anyone through who's clawing and screaming and crying. They want to come back ever, ever, ever. And I've never even heard of a medium that tells that story either. So we go when we're supposed to go. And if you lived with that knowledge, you wouldn't function normally. If when you created our families, all of us in the world, if we were told, okay, this will be your family, that one will be 10, that'll be 15 years, that one actually will be 30. Think about how different decisions you would make. And we're not meant to do that. That's why we're not told. Again, some people who have a short journey, they do have those feelings. I never felt I'd be here long, or, and they just didn't know how to process it probably. But in the big scheme of things, you can't know. Even as a medium, we're not told. If we're giving someone a reading, we're not told their transition date. That's not for us to know. That's not for them to know. That would affect every decision. And we're not supposed to do that.
That makes a lot of sense because we're living our human experience. So this is our connection.
Yeah.
Thank you, Debbie. I'm so grateful for your time, for your wisdom. This is amazing. And I will put your contact information below again. I want you to know how much you're appreciated and how much healing you're bringing to everybody who listens to this.
I thank you for the opportunity. I thank you very much. It's an honor to do this. It really is. To speak about all of this, it's an honor. I love it.
It's a never-ending, fascinating conversation.
Yeah, it is. It is.
So thank you, all of you who are listening. And if you have thoughts, questions, concerns, things you would like to be addressed, just put a message below here and let's keep these conversations going because these connections continue. So thank you so much. And I look forward to talking to you very soon.
Thank you.
Namaste.